and Yury Romanyuk, the head of the public organization, Ukraine and NATO, joins our broadcast. Mr. Yury, I am glad to see you. Welcome you on our air. Good morning. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes, Mr. Andriy.
We had a difficult day yesterday as well, and today. In fact, already realizing all the consequences of the Russian shelling of Kiev and Kryvyi Rih, we understand that we need to respond to this Russian terror as decisively as possible. All this happened yesterday, on the eve of the opening of the NATO summit in Washington. And my first question is for you. In your opinion, is it a coincidence that Putin chose this day to shell a children's hospital, maternity hospitals, residential buildings in Kiev, and kill dozens of people in Ukraine with his missiles?
No, this is a war crime against humanity that violates all the canons of war, norms, traditions of war, and violates international law, the Geneva Convention, according to which hospitals, and especially children's institutions, cannot be shelled. Putin is acting as he has been in Syria since 2015, destroying hospitals, deliberately choosing these targets and deliberately hitting them most painfully, knowing that the Охматдит Children's Hospital and other civilian facilities in Dnipro, Kryvyi Rih, and Pokrovsk are located there. This is his signal. This is the Kremlin's message to Washington that you can gather there at the NATO summit, whatever you want, decide to celebrate your anniversaries there. We are not afraid of you. We will act as we see fit, as we want, and will bend the whole world, and we will impose our position, and your point of view does not scare us, does not interest us, and we are not even going to pay attention to it. And Ukraine is our territory. We will not allow Ukraine to join NATO. These are, relatively speaking, such signals to show NATO the day before its summit, the Kremlin's position on the summit itself. I want to tell our viewers that this is a jubilee dedicated to the 75th anniversary of NATO. It is hosted by President Biden. Biden, who is not in the best situation right now after his debates. He wanted to turn his anniversary NATO summit into his pre-election triumph. He wants to celebrate this summit in such a way as to show the nation, the Americans, his voters, that they should vote for him, that he is a world leader, that he controls the whole situation, that he has created a coalition of forces around NATO in support of Ukraine, that they are a superpower, that they are developing, they are doing well, and he does not want to see any negatives at this summit. He wants everything to go all the more, again, after the debate, successfully, so that everything is very perfect at the summit. If we go beyond Ukraine's accession to NATO and an invitation to NATO, something that will definitely not happen at this summit and at the next one, at least in The Hague, then all the other decisions that are being prepared for Ukraine, everything that they want to provide to Ukraine, how they want to help Ukraine, those agreements that they want to sign, in principle, they carry a very positive message. They are very positive. They are extremely necessary for Ukraine. This is the strengthening of air defense and missile defense, which is already happening. This is funding provided for at least 2025 in the amount of 40 billion euros or $43 billion, which will fully allow Ukraine to ensure its defense capability and guarantee a transition to 2025 without any complications. Despite the fact that another president, Trump, may hypothetically come to the United States, who will completely stop any financing and arming of Ukraine, as he has already said a bunch of times. Further, Ukraine will be trained. This is a NATO mission that will continue to train Ukrainian troops. Further, NATO still has its own questions. They want, you know for sure, to create new 35 to 50 brigades in NATO on the eastern border, relatively speaking, to defend against Russia. I'm not emphasizing battalions, but brigades. And each brigade has at least 3,000. 3,000 to 35 on the minimum scale of 3,000 to 7,000 soldiers in one brigade is from 100,000 to 350,000. I don't think we are talking about 350,000. Most likely the working figure is still within 100,000 in total. It seems like a lot of 35 brigades, but for 32 countries, where not all of them have their own armies and not everyone can create a brigade, because, say, the army of Luxembourg has about 1,000 people. Estonian, only 2-3,000, but nevertheless it is really 35 brigades, up to 50 to create. They see the risks that Russia carries, they understand. But the number of military personnel and the condition that they have, it is unsatisfactory, must be increased. But there is a threat to Ukraine. You know that Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, said 3 days ago that 14 brigades are not armed and still remain in Ukraine, which do not have heavy weapons and other weapons. They need help from Ramstein. And here it is NATO that creates its own, from 35 to 50 brigades, which also need to be armed with the most modern weapons that are manufactured in NATO. And here there are two parallel processes that require weapons. And we don't have enough weapons anyway, even out of the $61 billion in US military aid. 40 billion, which Europe has allocated this year. And here they also create their own. It's all superimposed. Nevertheless, at the Washington summit, Ukraine will receive the maximum F-16 aircraft. The Netherlands has already stated that after the shelling of Kyiv and other cities, Охматдит, Ukraine will urgently be provided with F-16s as soon as possible. It is to be hoped that now, at the very opening of the summit, the Ukrainian sky will see the F-16. Kirby's statement, which took place yesterday, that the United States will not allow Ukraine under any circumstances, even despite the shelling of Охматдит, will not change its decision to ban shelling more than 100 kilometers deep into Russia, that they will not give such permission. This may be in the nature of a kind of secrecy. And they are right to claim that they will not allow us to shoot at 300 kilometers, because it should be a surprise for Russia in any case. And we cannot allow them to withdraw planes from their airfields within a radius of 300 kilometers and continue to bomb us, or be ready. It should be a surprise for them. Therefore, NATO will bring a lot of positive surprises for Ukraine, for NATO itself, for the collective security system, for the security architecture around the world. And in this regard, no sensations, except for positive ones, which no one wants to talk about, do not want to make public in advance. They will most likely be voiced directly from Biden himself in a personal meeting with Zelensky. There you also know that not only NATO members are invited to the NATO summit, but also partners from 32 countries. In particular, there will be a meeting of NATO with the Indo-Pacific region on ensuring security in Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, a separate meeting. There will be a sessional meeting in NATO. That is, NATO today performs at least two major functions, relatively speaking, on two fronts. One is in the Euro-Atlantic spectrum of Europe. The other is in the Indo-Pacific region, where they provide security against the DPRK, against China and against partly Iran. In short, this is the announcement of events that will take place today. And today, at 12 a.m. Kyiv time, Biden will address the American nation and the whole world on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of NATO. In particular, the key place in this speech will be given to Ukraine, the security of Ukraine. You know that a collective agreement between NATO and Ukraine in the field of security, the so-called security guarantees, should also be signed at the NATO summit. This is all that should happen at least at the NATO summit during these 3 days.
You have described a rather rich program to us. We are really looking forward to President Biden's speech by the end of the day. Let me remind you that a few days earlier, after an unsuccessful debate with Trump, Biden said in an interview with ABC that he was the leader who stopped Putin on his way to the seizure of Ukraine and a threat to the entire Western world. Did I stop Putin? Or am I the politician and leader who stopped Putin? Said Biden to himself, trying, in fact, to assert himself after this such an unfortunate episode of debate with Trump. Yesterday, many Ukrainians on Twitter tagged the page of the President of the United States and published footage of the shelling of Kyiv with missiles, as smoke rose over the central part of our capital. They published footage of Охматдит and asked Biden again, saying, "Did you really stop Putin, Mr. President of the United States?" They thanked us sarcastically, saying, "Thank you for stopping Putin. Look at the results and fruits of your labor." This is Biden's speech today. In your opinion, will it contain reflections on what happened in Kyiv the day before, let's say yesterday? And does Biden really have to prove not only in words, but also in deeds, already during this NATO summit, that he is still able to stop Putin.
I would like to respond to Biden's statement in the same way. With all due respect and gratitude to Biden for the mission that he fulfilled to support and help the boundless Ukraine and, of course, Ukraine to him, the Ukrainian people are grateful. The only thing that stopped Putin, with all due respect again to the United States and Biden, I believe that it was the heroism and courage of the Ukrainian people that stopped him. It was we who stopped, our Ukrainian nation stopped Putin with the help of the United States and allies, which Biden managed to cement, create, relatively speaking, a coalition of forces. Ramstein's allies in support and assistance in Ukraine. Biden himself said, "I will not allow a single U.S. soldier to fight in Ukraine." And so to say that he stopped a little. And so to say that he stopped it, as for a politician who is running for office and who needs any positive, he can use it, but we in Ukraine know it a little differently. Will something powerful be said in his speech? Yes and no. First, as a candidate for the presidency of the United States, and there should be a Congress at which his fate should finally be decided, because today all his supporters and Democratic allies are trying to convince him and his family to withdraw and nominate a new candidate before the convention. He declares that he will not be filmed, has no reason to leave. On the one hand, he wants to make a powerful speech as much as possible, including, if you like, somewhere partially and a little aggressive, insistent on convincing all his enemies and allies, including that he is capable of leading for the next 4 years. On the other hand, as a responsible politician, as a leader of the United States, he does not want to escalate with Russia under any circumstances. He doesn't want escalation with China. He doesn't want escalation with North Korea and Iran. He doesn't need any surprises until November 5th during his upcoming election campaign, and he doesn't want to escalate the situation. Therefore, nevertheless, changes will be made that cannot radicalize today's political background. On the contrary, he will do everything that the United States is the guarantor of stability and tranquility, and nothing will appear in the world as long as he is the President of the United States and as long as he is running for President of the United States to become the next one to continue this policy. On the one hand, this is in the national interest of the United States, but it does not satisfy Ukraine, because we need the radicalism of the United States. We need the United States to untie the hands of the Ukrainian armed forces, so that we do not fight with Russia with our hands tied, that we do not continue to listen to those claims of NATO that it is impossible to shoot more than 100 kilometers with American and NATO long-range missiles and bombs, and that we have no right to use the F-16s provided to us by the West on the territory of Russia. We need Biden's radicalism. Unfortunately, I am cautiously optimistic on this issue, because Biden, again, wants stability around the world. It is now disadvantageous for him to have any aggravation and escalation during the election campaign. And this does not work in favor of Ukraine. There is such a benefit here.
Well, cautious optimism is still optimism. Mr. Yuri, thank you for today's conversation, for announcing to us the NATO summit, which begins today. We will keep a close eye on this event. Yuri Romanyuk was in touch with us.